economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
At any rate, I did want to, RAD, it did come up. I suspected that it was going to be an issue. I mean, you live with white people for that long. I think she said she was white identified, which I thought was, that said it all. But I did want to go back to RAD, non-mighty wick. He explained the concept on the program yesterday.
RAD just means Racism Avoidance Disorder, or racism. This is basically just a failure to analyze things in the context of white supremacy. So it's whenever something comes up that should be looked at with all the pieces, you kind of give it a pass to say, no, it can't be that. That must not be that. And I think the guest today did kind of give white people a whole lot of space or passes on what, in my opinion, was clearly acts of racism, overt, right to her face.
I agree.
And I thought, it was yesterday's program was a great example, unfortunately. And he has a blog post where he explains this concept, and I thought it would be constructive. So I'll read that, and I'll also give out the address for this. I'll add both of these sites to the show page, so you'll be able to access the information more easily. The address for Non-Mighty Wick's blog, Racism YIT.blogspot.com, racismyit.blogspot.com, and the post on RAD. RAD isn't cool. Most people on this planet know racism, white supremacy, exists, but the non-white people have been confused as to the mechanics of its functionality. Experiencing the confusion long-term may result in an ongoing attempt to avoid understanding racism, white supremacy. A non-white person attempting to avoid understanding racism, white supremacy, is intertwined with a disturbed mental condition called Racism Avoidance Disorder, RAD, R-A-D. The key symptom of RAD is a lack of analysis in the context of white supremacy. He has a link for yesterday's program, I believe. Other symptoms include reluctance to address accurately analyze or admit the dominance of white supremacy, reluctance to acknowledge that people, namely the racist white supremacists, are opposing non-white people, doing things to be more acceptable to white people, suffering from, unconsciously and or consciously, the desire to be white. Racism Avoidance Disorder is a result of racism, white supremacy, being practiced in a refined manner. White people who practice racism, white supremacy, have learned and teach other white people what to say and or do, and what not to say and or do when in mixed company, quote unquote. White children easily pick this up and understand this refined method. The little things go a long way. Some examples. The average white person saying they welcome diversity, African American instead of nigger, as well as removing whites only signs. Through the practice of refined racism, white supremacy, white people have almost perfected the system of white supremacy. Evidence to this is the vast majority of non-white people are not interested in combating white supremacy. More evidence is that many non-white people call the refined method of practicing racism, white supremacy, progress, in quotes. Some non-white people even think white supremacy does not exist. Racists, white supremacists, must maintain an environment in which the number of non-white people who are willing to consciously combat racism, white supremacy, is insignificant. I'll read that one more time. Racists must maintain an environment in which the number of non-white people who are willing to consciously combat racism is insignificant. Refined white supremacy has nearly completely deteriorated the will of non-white people to combat racism, white supremacy. And then he has it's an equation, basically, or I can't say an equation, an expression. It's an expression. It basically says what it's expressing is as refined racism increases, this leads to an increase in the number of confused victims, which leads to an increase in the amount of racism avoidance disorder, which produces a decrease in the will of non-white people, specifically the degree of will non-white people display in consciously combating racism, white supremacy. And to combat this, as refined racism, white supremacy, as that decreases or as the non-white person becomes less confused about refined racism, they become more willing to honestly engage about racism, white supremacy, to be truthful about its existence and what to do about it. Their will, specifically their ability to consciously address this problem and work against it in a constructive manner, should increase. All of this is hinging on confusion, how you deal with that confusion. White supremacy is therefore purely political, based on prescription, prestige, and lack of effective opposition. These are indeed fragile foundations. Let the brown world, non-white people, once make up its mind that the white man, white supremacy, must go, and he will, for his position will have become simply impossible. It is not solely a question of a physical war, in quotes, mere passive resistance, if genuine and general, would shake white rule to its foundations. And this is a direct quote from Mr. Lothrop Stoddard, The Rising Tide of Color, against white world supremacy. The last sentence again, mere passive resistance, if genuine and general, would shake white rule to its foundations. Rising Tide of Color, page 83. Excellent post. Again, this is at racismyit.blogspot.com. racismyit.blogspot.com.
If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yep. Okay, go right ahead, sir.
This guy sounds like a really intelligent person to me. I'm a big fan of I just can't understand. I mean, granted, I'm only 39 years old, but I got friends that are the same age as me, grew up in the same neighborhood as me, and they've never, that I've seen, and we used to hang out a lot, never even been subject to racism, but once we, got older a little bit and they went their way and I went mine and I met up with them, later on in life, they got this attitude that, oh man, my people and we were treated so bad for so long. And I'd ask them, say, look here, Josh, what are you talking about? You and I grew up in the same place. And this gentleman seems to kind of, understand more along the lines of, hey, we need to get over it, and especially if it never happened to you.
May I ask, are you a white person or a non-white person?
I'm black.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we grew up in the same town, right out, side of Detroit, Michigan. There was only about three of us that hung out that were black. Oh no, four, because Ramon was with us. Four of us, and we all grew up in the, like I said, same neighborhood, same everything. And my one buddy Josh, he just like, he swears to this day that the whites did us wrong for all these years and blah blah blah. Well, I don't buy into that.
Well, that's a prerogative. I mean, a person can say that they don't buy into it, but that's a statement that a person's entitled to make. But I have taken the position that these crimes were committed and are being committed now. Otherwise, there would be no point in my presentation as of this moment.
Right. Well, it did take place. I've heard about it. Heard about my grandparents, the whole 9 yards. I get that, but it didn't happen to me. So I can't just keep bringing up something that happened to my grandparents years ago. I can't dwell on that.
If it's not happening to you now, then that's very fortunate for you, and I'd like to know how that was done, because I have made the statement consistently that if a person is non-white, that person is, as of this minute, not 100 years ago or 500 years ago, subject to the system of racism. The system of racism is a worldwide system. It takes in everybody who's non-white. And that is why I wrote my book, and that's why I'm having this conversation now. Now, that is either true or false. Now, just because I said it's true doesn't make it true. But in my evaluation, it is true. Because I've never seen any situation that wasn't dominated by racism. I've never seen it. And I've never heard of it. Because I was searching for it. I've always searched for a situation that was not dominated by racism. I have never seen it, and I've never heard of it. In all my travels and whatnot, I've never talked to anybody who says they know of a situation like that. And once I've talked to people who said that they didn't believe that that was a situation. So, but on examination, when I talked and asked certain questions about economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, I've never been in a situation or talked to someone who has been in a situation where racism didn't dominate one or more of those activities. Of course, if it dominates one, it'll dominate the rest of them too. That's what domination means. Once a person gets domination of one essential part of a person's existence, that's any kind of domination. Once a person dominates one essential part, that person or persons will dominate all the other parts, because all of the parts are interconnected. They're not disconnected. So it's just like a chain reaction. In other words, like holding the end of a chain. Now the chain may go over a building and through a building and around the corner and up under the ground and whatnot. But if that chain is around your neck or around your wrist or whatever, whoever jerks that chain, even though they are out of sight, you're going to feel it, because you're connected to the chain, and they're connected to the chain.
You're just kind of sounds like to me that you're just, pushing it along even more. I mean, you're not wanting to get over it. You're just wanting to make an excuse for it.
Oh, well, I could do that if it didn't exist. See what I mean?
Well, it doesn't.
That's the only way I can make an excuse. Now, if like the conversation started off saying that it existed a long time ago, my grandparents' day and all like that. Well, it did exist then, but what I'm saying is it exists now. I don't believe in fighting a battle that's long been finished, and no one should. That's complete insanity. I mean, that is certainly, you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. See, but the problem that I'm saying does exist in all of the areas of activity, and it exists 24/7 worldwide. Now, whether a person recognizes that or not, that's a different story.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that. It just seems to me like, how can you continue a battle that nothing, that you had nothing to do with, and like you said, if it's been started like when my buddy Josh's grandparents, it happened to them. But like I said, to my best knowledge, it never happened to us. We grew up in the same place. We hung around the exact same people. We weren't treated any different than the white kids, and I just have a hard time with it now when I go home and see him, that now all of a sudden he's I don't even have words, but
he's what? What is it he's doing? He's saying something about racism?
Yeah, and that it's he's been it's been in his family for years, and so now he's got an attitude even against some of the guys we hung out with when we were little, and he just brings it up, and it's like I said, until we were 17, 18 years old, it never happened to us, but he's making it sound like he's got to take over a fight that maybe his grandparents had a long time ago.
Okay, well let's look at your associate Josh. Could it be that what he's saying, he's not making it up, and he's not talking about the past? Could it be possible that he's talking about something he's looking at right now, and that what he is saying is that he sees it, but that you don't? Is that possible?
Absolutely.
Well, see, that could be the case. Now, it could be, like you said, that he's making it up, but I don't think he's making it up, because I see it too. And I've always seen it. I've never been in a situation where I didn't see it. Now, if I was looking for it and it wasn't there, then that's something different. And I've heard people say that, saying, well, I'm looking at the same thing that you're looking at, but I don't see what you see. And I say, yes, I know. That's the treachery of the way racism works. That sometimes you can be looking at it, and I have this in the book that I wrote. In racial matters, many look, but few see. See what? See what they're looking at. You're looking at it, but you don't see it. Like an optical illusion.
But if you're constantly looking for it, then, that's like they say.
So, but you can only see it if it's there. Otherwise, you are making it up, in which case nobody should do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But you're telling me just a second ago that you look for it. Well, if you're looking to see if something is racist, you're constantly, you got blinders on. You're looking for it, and you'll take any little, section of conflict or whatever and say, oh, that's racism. That's not because of, his bad attendance. That's racism. Because that's what you're looking for is what it sounds like.
But I will only, but see, the thing that I claim, that when I do look for it, I see it, because it is there. But it's not supposed to be there. That's the key. It's not supposed to be there.
But you're looking.
No matter how hard I look, I'm not supposed to ever find it, because it's not supposed to be there. Racism should not exist. That's the whole point. Just like cancer should not exist. See, now I can look past cancer, you know. I can not recognize it deliberately, or I can recognize it deliberately, but I make up my mind that I'd rather not think about it, so therefore if I don't think about it and I'm not feeling the pain directly at that moment because I'm laughing about something, like a cancer patient has laughed, but the cancer patient still has cancer. See what I mean? So racism is the same way. Black people laugh all the time. They're the laughingest people in the world, collectively. Nobody laughs like black people. In fact, there's more jokes made about laughing black people than anything else. Even in the old days, when it was right in your face, this thing called racism, black people laughed more then than they do now. Black people were the biggest jokesters because they were trying to hide the pain. That's why. But over a period of years, they laughed less and less as the pain began to go away, because they were laughing at the pain. They were trying to laugh off the pain. And now a lot of us try to put on the blinders to not see what is causing a world problem. Now, a person can look at President Obama and say, he doesn't really have a problem, like President Obama said himself, I'm trying to get health care for the people that don't have it. See, I have health care, me and my whole family. I will never have to worry about health care. I will get top-of-the-line health care. I already know that. He said, I'm trying to get it for the people that don't have it. He said, so if you're talking about me individually, he said, yes, I got health care, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not supposed to be concerned about other people not having it. See what I mean? So racism is the same way. There are some people who say, well, I've been able to skirt it, and I've been able to get by, and I've been able to do this. In the neighborhood that I was brought up in, I was able to shield myself from it. But see, the fact that you shield yourself from it means that it's there. And it shouldn't be there for you to shield yourself from it. I mean, that's the whole purpose, because when you try to move away, just like in the case of your friend Josh, when you try to reconnect with him, he's been hit by it, full force, and his behavior shows it. And that saddens you, but that's a fact. And the reason it's a fact is because he ran into it when he just moved just a little bit, and it hit him full force. Really, it had him full force all the time, and that's when it's really painful.
If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
What you are describing right now, like the ship that you were on and all like that, that's exactly the way that the white supremacists want it. Because what you were describing is confusion.
Hey, I'm not going to disagree with that.
Huh?
I'm not going to disagree with that.
You said you do disagree with that?
I will not disagree with that.
Oh, okay. Well, now, what you were looking at on that ship, because a ship is an excellent place. See, they experiment on ships.
Oh, listen, you know, I'm not going to disagree with that either. You should listen to one of my shows.
Yes, see, I mean, a ship is a laboratory for experiment. The slave ships themselves were laboratories of experimentation. So by the time they got to land, they had already worked out how a lot of things are going to work, because they had a captive audience. They had a captive clientele. It's something about being isolated on the water.
Okay, but okay, and then I'll get to a general. I mean, your ideas are very interesting, and honestly, when you were talking about the whole gay men and certain positions, I didn't live during that time, but that sounds very interesting. But ultimately, despite all the horrific experiences I had while in the military, right now I am benefiting from that experience, and I don't feel like I'm experiencing racism through that system. But I feel like it's because I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, and I don't know if it's true that I'm doing 10 times more than a white person next to me, but I know I spend a lot of time looking out for me. You know what I mean? And then I also look out for other people, but not like as a black or white thing. It's like as a veteran, as a gay person, as a black person, as an individual. You know what I mean? Like anybody who's with it. You know, I'm not out here to support hate. You know, when I joined the military, I didn't join the military because I wanted to bomb other countries. I mean, I was one of those people that were looking for benefits at a young age, and I got it. You know, I got it. And,
sure.
And so, you know what I mean? But and listen, I did experience racism and sexism and more than that there, okay? And I'm not denying that. And I'm not saying that, and I do, like you said, experiment. Yes, I felt that way. I felt like the shit was like a small world experiment, you know what I mean? Like just everybody put in that little boat of experimenting on society. But
Now, hold it right there. Hold it right there. If you could perceive that at a subliminal level,
at 18 through 22, yes.
That's what I'm saying. The white supremacists didn't discover this. The white supremacists set it up because that's what they were doing. They are experimenting to see what people will. They have done this as far back as the beginning of racism.
But do you
they know what kind of setups they can have where they can steer people into thinking whichever way they want people to think. They are masters at this. These are not things that happen by accident. That's what I'm saying. They know that under certain conditions, a ghetto, for instance, or a shanty town, or a ship, that you can do certain things. And then you can watch people in all types of environment. And you can actually steer them in such a way they don't even know they're being steered.
No, that's very interesting too. And I do believe that to a certain extent. Yet I don't really think it was.
Master psychologist.
I don't really
nobody
think it was,
that tops him at it.
Well, no, I mean honestly, through my observation, I didn't think it was necessarily so much. So I believe there was systematic racism and all that type of stuff like you're talking about. Yes, we agree on that. But also to a certain level, everyone had to take responsibility for their actions. You know, like I knew if I stayed in there, I was going to have to be a different person than I wanted to be. Okay? Or it was going to be very difficult for me. Some people can be cool, but it's very difficult for them. But they feel like that's their only option, perhaps. But if everyone takes, because no matter what they did to me, I took responsibility for my action. I did not let them manipulate me. And yes, I had to deal with, instead of being I was big time at one point. Towards the end, when they realized I was really getting out, I was very serious about what I felt about the military. Because a lot of people in the Navy, they're like, fuck this, fuck that. And that's all of them. But they stay in, and that's not just black people. I mean, a lot of black people get out. That's all types of people. So if there's a racism, a systematic system going on, they're all experiencing it to a certain extent.
Yes, but I have this question.
Yes.
At what point in your existence on the planet did you take what you started saying, responsibility, and that you no longer were being manipulated? Because
black people should cease right this minute participating in anything that sounds like it's going to lead to an argument. No contact, no conflict. In other words, if it looks like it's going to lead to an argument, you break contact right now. You just politely say, I'll talk to you some other time. Now, you didn't say that you're not going to talk to him anymore. But now it's not the time to continue this talk. Why? Because it's escalating into something that's going to get ugly, and then both of you are going to be standing there, hat in hand, scratching your heads, shuffling your feet, and saying, Master, please knock some sense into both of our heads.
Honestly, to be honest with you, from day one, but I think they thought I was a teenager, and they just had to, praise me and give me everything that someone would want. And, I mean, not saying I didn't earn these things. I took these tests and, I showed up on time and I did what I was supposed to do responsibly. But, I mean, I was all these awards, and then it's like, oh, you really are getting out. You really did just use this GI Bill and got, getting the fuck out, and not looking back.
I understand that, but here's what I'm saying. Under the system of racism, because, see, it's a world system.
But do you understand what I'm telling you, too? The black people were the same way. I mean, I was in...
I understand this. I want you to listen to me for a minute. I understand all of that. And that's a part of the system.
Who are you trying to blame? Are you trying to blame the white people for manipulating the black people to be racist against me?
No, I'm telling you. I'm telling you what the perspective of the codification. The white supremacists, like the captain of a ship. Now, you said that you were on a ship. That's one thing that I've always been taught about a ship. Whether it's the Titanic or the Forrestal, the captain is to blame for everything that happens on that ship that doesn't supposed to happen. Now, haven't you been taught that? In the Navy, I think you would definitely be taught that.
Well, I didn't need to be taught that. I observed 3 different captains, and I saw
how
the system worked under different
commands. I mean, in the old days, they used...
I can observe that myself. I don't need someone to tell me.
Okay, well, I'm just saying this. Okay, now, here's what. Just bear with me for a minute. The entire planet is a ship. And the people who believe in the practice of white supremacy are running the entire ship. Now, that's the premise. Now, that's either true or false. The white people on this planet, not all, but just the white people who believe in white supremacy, they run the planet, period, of all of the business of the people who are classified as non-white. And those people conduct themselves the way that the people who run the planet wanted them conducted. If I board a ship and all the sailors are drunk, I don't bother with the sailors. Anybody who has ever inspected a ship will tell you this. They don't run up and down the deck trying to collar every sailor on that Forrestal, on that aircraft carrier, and barking at them. No. When they're inspecting that vessel and they find the sailors drunk on that vessel, they go straight to the captain's cabin. Now, the captain of the ship that we call the planet is run by people who believe in and who practice white supremacy. That's the concept. So if you're going to blame someone for anybody, because, see,
I'm not blaming anyone. That's what I don't understand what
the people on the planet are all messed up. Okay, wait a minute, let me finish.
This is my thing.
Okay.
Mr. Fuller, Mr. Fuller, you as an individual, are you happy in your life?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and see, that's the difference. That's the difference, sir. I am, as some people in this chat room describe me, and I'm sure these people are black. I know they are, in very, not politically correct terms describing my ethnicity, which is unfortunate, and this just proves my point right here. And they think I'm lost, but they're proving my point right here in the chat room. But that's fine. I don't care what you want to call it. Okay.
Oh, you're not supposed to if you don't have a problem.
No. Sir, let me just finish my point. My point is that despite this racism that exists in society, I'm saying I am happy in my life. And I don't I socialize with anyone. I don't care what race you are, because I know there are good white people. I know there are good black people. I know there are bad people of all different races. And I've always been like that. And it was way before the military.
But you say that, well, wait a minute, you say something else, though. You say that you're a female and that you're gay, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now,
which should be another shot against me, right? I should be angry, right? I should be like, oh my God, I can't have these benefits. And I'm not that way.
According to the code, that means
that the white supremacists have done their job.
All right. Well, then, hey, their job works for me. Well, thank you, white supremacists.
Yes, that's the very point. And you say that you're. Wait a minute, hold it. And you say that you're happy.
I am, and that's the truth. I'm happy.
Absolutely, and that fits the old-fashioned description of gay. Now,
there you go. Hey, check out my homepage.
Yeah, you are gay and you're happy. Wait a minute. Now, let's look at it. That's the very point. The first part of the discussion this evening was just about the effect that the white supremacists want to have on what they consider to be non-white people. And that was my premise in the beginning.
Okay, now, I missed the beginning.
It's nothing better. It's nothing better than a happy person that the white supremacists have manipulated into being happy.
Why does it have to be white supremacists? Why can't it just be fighting for what you believe in? Why does it have to always be race when I'm saying individuals?
Well, in other words,
is Clarence Thomas, am I supposed to relate to him or something?
Wait a minute, say that again.
Am I supposed to be able to relate to Clarence Thomas? You want me to repeat myself?
Ask the question so that I'll know what the question is.
Am I supposed to be able to relate to Clarence Thomas?
Relate to him how? You're supposed to be able to relate.
Well,
people.
I mean, if you're listening to what I'm saying in a row, I'm saying, am I supposed to automatically assume that I am to get along or be able to relate to every black person, or assume that every black person is for my best interests? Or should I assume that a black person over a white person is in my best interest just because that person is black?
That's what I mean by asking one question at a time and answer that question. Okay. In answer to the first question, no, under this system, the way it's set up, you're not supposed to be able to relate to anybody in a constructive fashion, except the white supremacists when they want you to do it. Okay? So you got to think about what is their objective, because whether anyone realizes it or not, which just shows how good they are, they want to have absolute control without the person knowing that they are being controlled. That's the perfect situation, so that the person thinks that, what I'm doing is just the things that I want to do.
Do you think you're not being controlled?
Let me say this.
You are being controlled.
Let me say this about the way the white supremacists operate, because many people think this. The Indians thought that. I'm in control.
No, I'm asking you, do you think you're in control, because you're making it seem like you have more control because you're able to think past the white supremacists' game plan? And what I'm saying is, what makes you think you have more control or more freedom than I do? Perhaps, and I don't know for a fact, but perhaps I might have more freedoms than you do.
See, but that's another thing that the white supremacists do. Wait a minute. Let's hold it just
reality,
a second.
not the reality somewhere on Red Planet, whatever these people are from in this chat room.
Well, let me answer the questions as we go along. I'm not saying that you don't have anything. I'm saying what counter-racist logic says, because I'm dealing with racism. Now, I'm also saying something else, which you have said to me, and I'll just repeat it. You said you really got no problem with because you have figured out a way to be happy.
I did not say I don't have more problems. I said that perhaps
what
my
did you
situation
say? You said you were happy.
is a little bit more. I did say I'm happy, and you said you were unhappy. I said perhaps my situation, not knowing you personally, but knowing my situation, perhaps I have more freedoms. And I don't want to get into the details because I will assume that you understand what I mean by freedoms. Or freedom, benefits or whatever you want to talk about, than you.
No problem. But see, here's what. That's exactly what I mean by the system of white supremacy. And one thing I want to definitely make clear. Wait a minute. Hold it. I'm trying to make something.
My situation is better than a lot of white people.
I know, but you're trying to.
How are the white people controlling?
Wait a minute. But see, we think. See, there's anxiety here. And see, and this is exactly what is supposed to be avoided. We are trying to even talk over each other. This is exactly what happens under the system of white supremacy, and neither one of us are white supremacists. That's number one.
Absolutely.
Because I know you're not a white supremacist if you're considered to be non-white.
Absolutely.
All right, because you can't be.
That's
you got to be white
to make
to be a
the
white
point to you as a non-white person. That's telling
I
you.
know
my
that, but here's
situation
what.
is
But
better
see,
than and you might
hold
have
on a second, ma'am. Hold on a second. Hold on a
lady,
second, ma'am.
I have
hold on.
to,
Thank you.
I have to explain something very important as to what's going on right here. The very fact that we have this high-pitched conversation means that the system is working exactly the way they want it. Because, see, now, I talk to white people. It's a white lady that calls me every day or every other day and has been doing it for years. We don't get into this. And you know why?
Well, good. I'm glad you're socializing with white people.
Wait a minute. No. Wait a hold it. You see, you're doing it again.
She's not controlling you like a slave.
Hold on a second, ma'am.
See, the anxiety is there. The anxiety is there. You can see it. You can't even wait for me to explain something because the anxiety is there.
You keep saying certain things that really don't connect. I don't get your point.
But you are saying it as if you...
And I'm asking you questions because at one point your concept seemed maybe a little unique, but maybe I haven't been paying attention to all the other shows that these people from the chat room are, because maybe this... honestly, I think that... this show is very interesting. I do, I think I enjoy the host.
But I got a question.
I like the way it goes. But in all honesty, I understand your point. I've heard, you don't know my background, so I've heard everything you have to say before, unfortunately. But I do wish you the best, and much love to the people in the chat room who don't understand what I'm talking about. Much love.
Thank you. I find that very interesting. I want you to finish your point that you wanted to make with the caller, but I also want to reiterate.
Yes, so what happened? What has been happening between me and the caller has been exactly what's not supposed to happen. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. But every time it is this way. See, I was on a program the other night. Same thing. See, because the white supremacist has it set up so that this is a guarantee. See, the very fact that she feels even interested enough to have these conversations, all right, and then have this kind of anxiety while she's having it, that is exactly what the white supremacists want. And this is why I say the code says, hey, if you're going to have an argument, you don't have arguments about race with no other black person ever, or no other non-white person. It's never supposed to happen. All arguments are supposed to be between white and non-white. All, without exception. Never. See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
But see, because it's going to be automatic when it's white. When it's non-white with non-white.
That I think it is fabulous that you were able to demonstrate that in the caller. Thank you for calling in for demonstrating that. I wanted to remind our listeners, most of these programs, and I believe this is about the 40th program that I have done addressing racism, white supremacy, most of my programs I have white people on. In fact, we have a white professor from the University of Southern California. She's coming on in less than 30 minutes to talk about white supremacy. And I generally never have that much interrupting, that much anxiety, tension in the conversations I have with white people. Even if we do not agree, I've had Tim Wise on the show, and we didn't agree about very much of anything. He's not a fan of mine. I'm not a fan of his. But we did not have nearly as much tension, yelling, interrupting in the conversation. It was smooth. The person would allow you to make your statement, voice where they didn't agree, no yelling, no voices raised, no interruptions. Very stark contrast in most of the conversations I observe between non-white people and other non-white people about racism. It ends up being arguments and complaints and just not constructive communication. So I'm very thankful that you pointed that out. And if you could you finish your statement about your thoughts that she said she was gay and she said she was happy, and you felt that was by white supremacist design? If you could perhaps maybe wrap up, and if you could explain that thoroughly for us so we all get an understanding.
I mean, once you get the non-white person in a state of mind and a viewpoint of life, of what life should be about for them, as a victim, I mean, there's an old adage, I mean, there's nothing better than having a happy slave. That's a perfect situation. A slave that's walking around grumpy all the time, man, is dangerous. I mean, and any slave master going all the way back through history, I mean, will tell you whether, you're talking about the Roman Empire or you're talking about a plantation slave owner in Louisiana. They will sell a grumpy slave down the river first time they get a sale. And then one thing they don't want the rumor to get out. Now, this slave is always grumpy, always complaining about everything. Don't like nothing. Don't like the food, don't like the plantation. Can't stand the master. But the slave that's playing that banjo and kicking up his heels and think he's in heaven, that's the one we want to keep. A grumpy slave might slip up behind you any dark night with an axe.
Well, I assume our caller, it seemed like from what she was saying on the phone, she doesn't think white supremacy is that much of a problem. She said she was happy. I assume white supremacy.
And another thing, I just want to interject this. That was very important, but she wouldn't let me get that word in. If she's already happy with the way everything is, then why bother with having these kind of conversations at all? See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I wrote my book only for people who say that they are victims. It says right on the cover. I've run into dozens of people who say, I'm not a victim. I say, well, then the book is not for you. If racism doesn't affect you, that you don't have no problem with it or nothing like that, there's nothing in this book for you. And in fact, the only suggestion I have for you is to teach other people how you were able to pull it off. You're a black person and you've never been victimized by racism, and if you were victimized, you came up with a way of dealing with it that really worked for you. I said you should do, what the code says that every person should do to find themselves in that golden position. Teach other people exactly how you did it, all the steps that you took. And I said, and you can start with me.
If being so-called homosexual is a part of that process, I think I'm going to have to pass and find.
No, I'm going to pass on that part.
Yeah,
see what I mean? Because that's a part of the racist conspiracy. I've already decided that. See, so if they come to me, well, Fuller, if you really don't want to deal with racism and be happy and get all kind of benefits, which he mentioned benefits, and all like that, and go on and live your life, then, Fuller, you got to become a homosexual. And then I say, no, because that's a part of their plot. It's not a part of mine. No, I'm not doing that. Yeah, I know about the benefits that go with that. I've seen it. But are they really benefits? What does it, and I have this written in some of my notes, what does it matter to gain the whole world and have to give up your gender?
You are now listening to P.A.R. People Activity Radio, and I'm your host, JohnGHorse. Welcome. You have found your family in a peaceful place. Yes, indeed. P.A.R. aims to be a family-friendly information distribution program seeking to inform non-white people, in particular black classifieds, and assisting in counter-racist codification. The title of today's episode is Racism Avoidance Disorder, RAD, and the Industry of Black American Confusion, Part 1. Yes, indeed. This will be a repetitive attempt at pointing out how victims of racism, white supremacy respond to their victim status. And in some cases, some victims who are more confused choose the right and or the route of avoiding the topic of racism. And it manifests while or when interacting with other victims who are looking to acknowledge and solve the problem of global racism, white supremacy. Yes, indeed, this is a conundrum, because in most cases when victims and or people who are classified as black or who are subject to black classification want to come together with other people who are classified as black to solve their problems, which we have concluded here on People Activity Radio, all are problems caused by being subject to the global system of racism, white supremacy. When people who are classified as non-white, in particular people who are classified as black, come together to solve their problems in society, there will be less confused people who are classified as black. That will bring up the subject of race and or the subject of racism, who we have identified manifest in society as a global system of white supremacy. And there will be fellow victims who want no part of that conversation. And in essence, if you don't want no part of that conversation at a gathering of non-white people and people who are classified as black or subject to black classification, you're not there to solve the problem. And the problem is white supremacy in all areas of people activity. Now, under that context, I played 2 clips of a talk show hosted by Gus T. Renegade named The C.O.W.S. C.O.W.S is an acronym for the context of white supremacy. And I contend that this is the most constructive, the most informative, the most comprehensive show for people whom are classified as black to listen to, learn from, and manifest less confusion within their day-to-day life, livelihood, be it workplace racism, be it educational work racism, be it any type of mistreatment that non-white people, in particular people who are classified as black, experience throughout all areas of people activity. You can consume the content from The C.O.W.S, hosted by Gus T. Renegade, and I promise you, you will learn something each episode. But I digress. The first clip was a clip that had a victim who identified himself as black, and he said to the guest of the C.O.W.S, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., "Looks to me, Neely Fuller Jr., that you are focusing on racism, and everywhere you look, you find it. If you just stop looking for it and quit crying about things that happened some time ago, back when my grandparents were sticking and moving and living, didn't happen to me, then you will be able to see that it may not be that you're being mistreated because you're classified as black. It just might be some things that you're doing that's manifesting this mistreatment that you see, because I don't see it. And I got friends that are classified as black that always want to whine and moan, talking about they are experiencing mistreatment from white people. And to that caller, and people like that caller, JohnGHorse says, to you, VGQ. Now one would ask, what do you mean VGQ, JohnGHorse? What the heck is that? What is the V? What is the G? What is the Q? Well, under the system of racist white supremacy, we here on People Activity Radio have concluded that all victims have guaranteed qualification to react to their victim status in whatever way they choose. You understand that? Therefore, if that victim who had a problem with the context of racism, white supremacy, if that victim who had a problem with his friend who he said name was Josh, if that victim had a problem with Neely Fuller Jr.'s code book directed toward victims of racism, white supremacy, if he chooses to ignore the system of racism, white supremacy, and it works for him, to that victim, VGQ. But we here on People Activity Radio, we here on P.A.R. On P.A.R. is being on code. We're trying to fix the problem. We aim to fix the number one problem that exists on earth, and that problem is white supremacy. And to fix that problem and to replace the problem with a system of justice, you got to address the problem. So we choose to address the problem. We think that we are less confused, but hey, we could be in error. You understand how that works? Not only that, this victim who called in to the cows to literally debate talking about racism, white supremacy, because he said it's something in the past, doesn't exist anymore. The question is always going to be asked to those victims who decide that acknowledging racism is not the way to go. If you don't acknowledge it, does that mean it doesn't exist? Or is your non-acknowledgement a way of coping with the existence of mistreatment based on color manifested in the form of racism, white supremacy? Meaning those people who are classified as non-white are subject to mistreatment in all areas of people activity. And the second clip, there was a female listener who called in to the cows, and she called in with a critique to, again, Neely Fuller Jr. And she identified herself as a non-white person who was multi-ethnic, which is confusing. I think, now I could be in error, she was of Spanish-speaking ethnicity and black classification, which means you're just non-white, or you're black, or you're classified as black. She also identified herself as a veteran of the U.S. military, I believe by way of Navy. But the most enthusiastic identifying term she identified herself as was she was gay. Now, last I checked, when you look in the dictionary, the term gay means happy. But for the lack of less confusion, we're going to use the term in the context that it's used in everyday society, which means she practiced alternative bedroom politics. I believe she practiced alternative bedroom politics in a form of she is a woman and she engages in alternative bedroom politics with other like-minded women. And to her, I say VGQ, victims guaranteed qualification to react to racism, white supremacy any way you choose is fit and works for you. But she said she does not have a problem with racism because from her experiences in life, she have been mistreated by people who were classified as non-white, in particular people who are classified as black. So now how can racism exist if people who are classified as black is mistreating me too? I believe Neely Fuller Jr. tried to explain to her if we are under a global system of racism, white supremacy. And he used an analogy saying if the global system of racism, white supremacy is a ship, and the ship is ran by the captain, and all things on the ship is under the captain's responsibility, and the ship of racism, white supremacy, which is a global system, is controlled by people who classify themselves as white and believe in racism, white supremacy, then all things on the ship starts with them. Because all other people who are classified as non-white, in particular people who are classified as black, are subject to the control and the authority of people who classify themselves as white and believe in racism, white supremacy. So if you have subordinates on the ship mistreating you, they are mistreating you under the authority, under the military-backed and supported control of the white supremacists. But I could be in error. Maybe I misunderstood what I was listening to. All this to say that both victims who called into a show which is titled The Context of Racism, White Supremacy, called to talk about how racism doesn't exist. And the question is, why are you even on a show? Why are you listening to a show if you have concluded that racism, white supremacy doesn't exist, and you feel the need to call in and debate other victims who are speaking about their victim status and about how they have been mistreated based upon being classified as non-white. If you live in your life and you're happy and everything's working for you and racism, white supremacy doesn't exist, how would you even run across any show talking about racism, white supremacy? Unless somewhere deep down in your pores, in your DNA, you feel some type of way. And you might be practicing self-medication by debating on the behalf of white supremacy because you have been a victim. Now, listen, I'm no doctor. I'm not no psychoanalyst. But listen, whenever you run across non-white people, in particular people who are classified as black, who wants to debate you on the existence, and this is my conjecture, who wants to debate you about the existence of racism, white supremacy, hey, stop squabbling with one another, like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said. And to manifest black self-respect, if you disagree with another non-white person on this particular subject, my codification is to stop that conversation right then and there Because I'm not going to squabble with another non-white person on the existence of the global system of racism, white supremacy. That's a waste of time. There's nothing going to be accomplished. If a person just doesn't acknowledge it, that's their choice. Victims guarantee qualification. All right, let's move on. You know what? I'm going to have to holler at you later because I got some things to do. Take care and see you next time. Gotta leave with no ugly discourse and sweating and hooping and hollering. Nothing wrong if a person doesn't want to acknowledge it, but for people who seek less confusion, for people who find the content of P.A.R, People Activity Radio, constructive, we're going to acknowledge this thing and we're going to create less confusion, because a less confused group is a group who can solve problems on their own and they don't need the overseeing of the dominant society who classify themselves as white. And only then and only then will we be on to something. You understand me? I'm going to leave you with a clip from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And she's going to break down certain behaviors and mannerisms and codification that would be extremely beneficial to people who classify themselves as white. And her number one thing is stop squabbling with one another. Her number one thing is to practice black self-respect in the form of always showing respect to fellow victims who are classified as non-white, in particular people who are classified as black. And that will go a long way in a short time in resolving the problem, the number one problem on earth, the global system of racism, white supremacy. And without further ado, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing on black self-respect. Cue the clear.
I'm going to not squabble. I'm not going to be discourteous or disrespectful to another black person. And just imagine if we were talking to each other and talking to our children about countering racism, and so we don't fight each other and we don't kill each other. Now, I've added to that list, stop using and selling drugs to one another. Stop black children from thinking that as children they can be adequate mothers and fathers. Stop throwing down trash where black people live, work, and play. Stop pretending that racism, white supremacy does not exist. And stop allowing racism, white supremacy to divide black, brown, red, and yellow people. Do you see? So those behaviors people can select. You know, I say every black person should get a PhD in broom studies, meaning we don't throw trash. We don't throw chicken bones. I got out of my car a week ago and, somebody had thrown some chicken bones in the street. These are behaviors that we don't engage in because we value and respect ourselves as black people, and our behavior in relationship to ourselves and one another is going to reflect that we respect ourselves. And I say that there's no more powerful weapon than self-respect. And if black people begin to focus in this way and say we are going to understand exactly and precisely what racism, white supremacy is, and we are going to use our understanding and our self-respect in countering this most terroristic, this most unjust system of behavior that exists on planet Earth.
Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, straight no chaser, bars. And I hope I have contributed to less confusion. And remember, keep learning. and stay codified.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.